This is Montana Talks with Aaron Flint.
It has just been victory after victory after victory for President Donald Trump. Well, let's be honest. It's not a victory for President Donald Trump. It's a victory for America. It's a victory for Montana. And even on some Montana-specific ones that we've seen as recent as this week. I'll tell you what. Now, some of you might say, well, but what about impeachment, Aaron? You know, we just heard just a few minutes ago, within the last hour, House Judiciary Democrats on a party line vote voted in support of impeachment against President Donald Trump. Let's be honest, that's a victory for Donald Trump, too. This whole impeachment circus has been an absolute embarrassment for Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. Why do you think they finally had to cave and support the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement? Because they had to announce something positive because they knew how negative their impeachment push was going to be with the American people. But yeah, victory after victory after victory for President Trump this week. You know, yesterday, right after we wrapped up our conversation live from the Montana Stock Growers Convention, I heard about another victory. We were talking about the big victory for President Trump when it comes to the USMCA. We talked about that with Montana Stock Grower President Fred Wacker yesterday on the show, which also led to discussions about the other victories, which was the EU trade deal, which was the Japan trade deal, and the positive momentum that is going to bring about when it comes to a potential China trade deal. In fact, now we've got news this morning about a phase one China trade deal. But the even bigger news on the trade front was Brexit and the big elections in the UK yesterday. In fact, I was talking with Senate President Scott Sales, the Montana Senate President, and he's a candidate for Secretary of State. We're chatting with him earlier this morning, and he's like, wow. He's like, Boris Johnson pulled off the win. Because there were some people saying that Boris Johnson over in the UK was in trouble. And yet, the numbers that they posted, that the conservatives posted in the UK general election yesterday, are the best numbers they have ever pulled going back to the Margaret Thatcher days of the Reagan 80s. I mean, that's how remarkable this is. But why is it remarkable also when it comes to trade and President Trump and trade and Montana? You see, because what we would rather have here in Montana for our great farmers and ranchers is not have to deal with the big behemoth of the European Union, which has punished American manufacturers, which has punished American farmers and ranchers with tariffs. We'd rather cut a side deal with the Brits. We'd rather cut a side deal with the UK, a bilateral trade deal, to get a better deal for our farmers and ranchers. And with this huge victory by the Conservatives in the UK yesterday, that's what that allows and sets the path for. So that is huge. Also a huge victory for President Trump yesterday with these UK election results as well. But from a Montana standpoint, it doesn't stop there. Just after we wrapped up our conversation at the Montana Stock Growers yesterday, I got the news that Aurelia Skipwith was confirmed to be the director of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services. Now, she's got a lot of Montana connections. She's been back here in Montana. She had strong support from farm and ranch groups, from the NRA, from the Safari Club and other outdoor groups. A lot of Montana connections. Senate Democrats had been holding up her nomination for months. And now President Trump and the Republicans stood firm. She's now been confirmed as the director of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife under the Department of Interior. First ever African American to hold that post. Nominated and by President Trump, confirmed by Senate Republicans. But what about the news? Lawrence Van Dyke, the Montana native, confirmed as a judge on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals